can't neuroimaging be used for clinical diagnosis of ADHD? Because at this point, it can't. No one has been able to accurately classify cases of ADHD relative to typical cases using these methods in clinical practice or even in research. So why is it? I mean, after all, we got all of these research studies showing lots of differences between ADHD groups and typical groups on all of these various scanning devices. So why can't we use it for clinical practice? Well, here's why. Let's go back to the point I just said. Imaging methods are very useful in research studies, but that's because we compare large groups of individuals, say ADHD, versus typical. So we're comparing groups and many people within the group, and we average their scans together, and therefore we compare the differences in the means of these groups to each other. So think of two bell curve distributions, one for ADHD, one for typical people on the scan, and we're comparing their means. And oftentimes there are statistically significant differences between these means. And so the paper has a positive finding that there are these imaging differences between these groups. But let me point out something. The differences in these studies are so small that it takes comparison of groups, many people within these groups, to detect the group differences. That's what studies are looking at, group differences. What clinicians are looking at is how a single individual differs from other typical individuals. So clinicians are comparing and classifying cases, not comparing two groups on average differences. The neuroimaging is not useful in clinical practice because the differences from typical people are rather small. If we look at brain volume of the cortex, let's say, it's about 3 to 5% smaller in people with ADHD than in typical people. And if we look at activity differences or regional differences in activity, it might be anywhere from 10 to 25% less active. These are not profound differences, and they would be hard to spot on an individual scan. So the bottom line, folks, is that at this time, neuroimaging cannot be used in clinical practice for making a diagnosis, for subtyping people with ADHD, or for planning treatment with ADHD.